How's it going, people? Salmon Slappy here, and this is Runescape lore, and today we're going to be carrying on covering the Mahjarrat. In particular, we are going to be talking about Zemouregal. Now, Zemouregal is a powerful Mahjarrat who actually assisted Zamorak during his rebellion against Zaros. And we do know that Zemouregal himself is quite a powerful necromancer. He's also heavily involved within the entire history of Varrock for the most part, and he was also the antagonist in the Legend of Arav book, which covers one of the major fights in Varrock's history, in which he actually attempted to forcibly take an Imkando shield and destroy Varrock, or Avarok as it was known back then. So Zemouregal himself is kind of vain, and as you expect generally among the Majharrat, he's kind of arrogant. But unlike some of his friends, his kin I should say, such as Khazad, he is quite clever and can manipulate situations to his desires. He does seem fairly influential amongst the Majharrat though, as particularly on the Zamorakian side, seeing that he was able to decide on the sacrifice for the 16th ritual on his own, and the kin actually agreed. So all in all, he's quite high up in the rankings, I'd assume, within kind of like Majharrat hierarchy. In the 4th age, sometime between the 14th and the 15th ritual of Rejuvenation, though, Zemouregal began to write a set of notes on his cousin's advice, keeping track of the whereabouts and alliances of many of the Majharrat. A notable entry of that is of Anakra, currently the last living female Majharrat alive on Gielinor, who actually rejected Zemouregal's offer to sire more of their race. So there we go. And that was basically because Anakra was, and as far as I know, still is, in love with Zamorak. So maybe you will see Majharrat babies? I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But thanks to the latest quest, where we actually got to travel over to freneskae, which we know is where the Majharrat actually came from, we have a bit more information on this one. On all the previous Majharrats, I kind of went over the same kind of thing. We knew that Ixthlarin came over, brought them over, and that was pretty much it. But now we know a little bit more, so with that said, arrival to Gielinor. Like the other Mahjarrat, Zemouregal did indeed live on freneskae, the realm of perpetual warfare, along with many other tribes. It was here that they would live to survive the elements and the destructive power of the legendary elder god Mother Ma. Mother Ma actually created their race, and she was actually prevented from wreaking havoc on freneskae due to the rituals of rejuvenation and the rituals of innovation. Although at least one Majharrat regarded her as a mere myth and the rituals as superstitious traditions, due to the constant conflict with neighbouring tribes such as the Mahjarrat, as well as the frequent sacrifices at the rituals, the Majharrat tribe never counted more than a few hundred members and was ruled kratocratically. In the Second Age of Gielinor though, there was two demigods, Ixthlarin and a mascot, and it was these two that actually did indeed travel to freneskae in order to recruit the Majharrat to fight the Zerosian invaders. This was the Caridian-Zerosian War. Some Majharrat opposed the proposal, while others did indeed agree to go, causing a large battle to break out. Both Azanadra and Temekel argued that the Majharrat should go with Ixthlarin, and Karshai was one of the most excited at the prospect of leaving freneskae, as Gielinor is a much kinder realm compared to what freneskae was. Eventually, after the death of Salazar and the sacrifice of Abragal, those in favour of travelling to Gielinor emerged victoriously, and the entire Majharrat tribe accompanied the two gods to Gielinor. It was here that Zemouregal aided the Menethite warriors in driving back the Zerosian army, and he actually did it with some success. During this time, they were known as the Stern Judges of Ixthlarin. However, as the Menethites had almost ensured their victory a couple of years later, the Majharrat, by the name of Sliske, as you all know, he had actually gotten into a feud with Ixthlarin over battle methods, and he did indeed approach a Zerosian legate, a Chthonian demon named Duke Ceres, and he there made arrangements to desert the Menethites and join the Zerosian side. Most of the Majharrat convened at the fortress of Caradet and soon emerged, joining arms with the Zerosians, and they proceeded to slaughter the retreated Menethite armies. It was at this time that the god Tumekon, father of Ixthlarin and Amascut, swiftly intervened by sacrificing himself, his armies, and indeed half of his empire to repel the Zerosians. To do so, he actually used his powers of fire to create a massive explosion. This single act to oppose the Zerosians turned the once bountiful land of Carid into a desert wasteland, as well as obliterating his own army and most of the Zerosians. Of the approximate 500 Majharrat present, less than a fifth survived the explosion thanks to Azanadra, who quickly erected a magical barrier as protection. Zemouregal was actually amongst those to survive and joined the remainder of the Zerosians on the march to Varinthi. He was soon given the rank of Legat in the army of Zaros. Later in the age though, Zemouregal did indeed assist Zamorak in the betrayal of Zaros, fending off Zaros' bodyguards while Zamorak actually duelled Zaros himself. After a long and tedious battle, Zamorak did indeed emerge victorious, having accidentally absorbed most of Zaros' power, and with Zaros eventually abandoning his body to avoid death, Zaros' spirit cursed those who had assisted in the rebellion. But although Zemouregal was one of those actually stricken by said curse, as far as we know, he remained unaffected. Due to the magic running through his veins, the betrayal was incredibly successful. However, Zamorak was banished by the other gods for the imbalance of power he actually caused, during which time Zemouregal and the other allies decided to lay low. Shortly after, Zamorak returned to Gielinor in hope of reclaiming the Stone of Jazz, and indeed called Zemouregal along with his other greatest warriors and started what is now known as the God Wars of the Third Age, wherein Zemouregal assisted Zamorak once more, likely using his necromancy skills to raise undead armies to bolster his forces. The God Wars lasted approximately 4 millennia, and the rituals of Rejuvenation actually continued during this period, with the Majharrat being split into a Zerosian and Zamorakian faction. Zemouregal, belonging to the latter, prevailed during each of them and remained one of the most powerful Majharrat alive. Into the Fourth Age. Yeah, at the end of the God Wars, Zemouregal's actions kind of did remain rather secret. Although he is mentioned a few times throughout books, which is why we know that during the Fourth Age, the Avarokian hero Arav actually encountered Zemouregal in the Land of Dreams, who warned Arav that he desired to take Avaroka for himself. It was at this time that one of the elders of Avaroka, manipulated by Zemouregal, advised Arav to seek a powerful shield, as he would supposedly be able to use it to defeat Zemouregal. Zemouregal had actually been searching for this shield for many years though, as it was an immensely powerful artifact, and it allowed its bearer great power over all races. Zemouregal desired it, as it was able to deflect the spells that any Majharrat can summon, with which he could actually use it to defeat any of the other Majharrat as well as enslave them. Arav then actually went on a journey in search of this shield, and eventually found a tribe of dwarfs known by the name of Imkandos. They actually claimed to possess the shield. However, they actually refused to give him the shield, claiming that he would not have the shield, as they believed that Arav would only be defeated by Zemouregal, allowing Zemouregal to claim the shield for himself, which they simply would not allow to happen. A few years later though, Zemouregal once again appeared to Arav in the Land of Dreams. Zemouregal claimed that Arav had failed, and due to this, he would come and destroy Avaroka with his army of undead minions, and that he would come and lay waste to mankind, once again cementing the Majharrat as the masters of the world. Arav at this actually left Avaroka, taking only his weapons and armors, running for 6 days straight, before finally reaching the chief of the Imkando dwarfs. Arav once again pleaded to receive the shield, but this time the dwarfs actually gave it to him, claiming that they had actually seen the future and that only one path was open to them, as once Zemouregal destroyed humanity, he would turn his attention to the dwarfs. By the time Arav returned, Avaroka had actually been raised. They actually raised an army in anticipation of Zemouregal's coming. And shortly after, Zemouregal arrived with a massive horde of undead, beginning his attack on Avaroka. As this war between the two sides erupted though, Arav actually headed into battle against Zemouregal himself, dispatching his undead minions along the way. Zemouregal, wielding a sword of pure shadow and smoke, claimed that although Arav's shield may protect him, he will see his people slaughtered as they become part of his undead army. A fight broke out between the two, and despite Arav's great strength and agility, he was actually indeed helpless to the strength of Zemouregal's blows, simply being unable to fight back. Arav, being distracted by the falling Avaroka in the distance, was struck by Zemouregal's sword in his thigh, and upon which Zemouregal actually began to laugh. Arav, looking down at his unscratched shield and seeing the truth of his path, used all of his remaining strength to run back towards Avaroka, throwing the shield into the town. It was here that it was actually picked up by the grandson of one of the elders of Avaroka, who somehow unlocked the shield's true power and turned the entire zombie army into dust with a large bolt of magic. Upon seeing this, and unable to accept his loss, Zemouregal struck Arav in the back with a powerful spell. Wounding and crippling with pain, Arav fell to the ground and crawled through the mud. Zemouregal stood over him, calling him a fool, saying although that Arav have actually sacrificed himself to save his home, it was a pointless sacrifice, and with time Zemouregal would once again return. But with Arav leading his armies, Zemouregal then fired a powerful smoke spell at Arav, and although he tried to struggle against it, he did indeed die. Zemouregal then disappeared with the body of Arav. Zemouregal then used his necromancy skills to bring Arav back to life, and indeed, as he promised, forced Arav to serve him as his undead commander, performing a special ritual on Arav, removing his still beating heart and using magics to replace it in a highly secured area within his base. This gave Zemouregal complete control over Arav's body, but leaving Arav's mind intact so he could watch in horror as he was forced to kill innocents, and unable to do anything about it. The next time we hear about Zemouregal is actually the 16th Ritual of Rejuvenation. This is shortly before the 16th ritual was to take place. A weak Zamorakian Majharrat by the name of Lamistad attempted to bypass attending the ritual as he would likely be sacrificed. But at the same time, he was still trying to become close enough to the ritual stone to actually be rejuvenated. And in order to achieve this, Lamistad actually began tunneling eastwards from the top of Trollwise Mountain, and actually did indeed plan to tunnel right underneath the ritual marker to receive the full power boost during the ritual itself. However, didn't particularly go as planned. He accidentally broke into Zemouregal's fort basement. Yeah, when Zemouregal discovered this, he imprisoned Lamistad and, at the ritual, obviously suggested that he be sacrificed. The other Majharrat, obviously quite happy the decision wasn't made that they sacrificed, completely agreed with Zemouregal, and indeed Lamistad was faced with the void. Again, the next time we see about Zemouregal himself is during the Nadir mini-quest. Shortly after Ralvash has been sacrificed at the 17th ritual, Zemouregal was asked by his cousin Lucian to return to the ritual marker. This request was made by Moya, Lucian's daughter, whose mother was a human. Zemouregal showed much interest in the, as he said, mongrel, although later agreed that she is useless. Moya wanted to inform her father and his cousin of the fact that someone, later revealed to be Bilrak himself, has tried moving the ritual marker. Although Lucian claimed this to be impossible, nevertheless the two Majharrat argued who, or even what, could have attempted to move the marker, and why, before sending Moya away to actually find the culprit. While they remained to investigate, Moya actually occasionally reported to Lucian over the course of the next 500 years, but Zemouregal soon lost interest in this. And later on, in the 5th Age, is the next time we see Zemouregal and actually hear about him. In the year 169 of the 5th Age, Zemouregal once more decided to attempt another attack on Varrock, and this once again was to capture the shield of Arav before the 18th ritual finally took place. It was to this end he began assembling an army of armoured zombies in his base underneath the wilderness. The Varrockian scout Hartwin learned of this army of zombies being amassed when he actually saw them strangely organised at the Graveyard of Shadows. He reported this to Captain Rovin, who sent an adventurer along to actually investigate it. By following the tracks, they eventually managed to discover Zemouregal's base, and that Zemouregal was indeed preparing for another attack on Varrock to attempt to claim the shield before heading to the north. This time with the undead Arav aiding him as a commander by force. It was during this sneaky attempt to actually enter Zemouregal's little army that they overheard Zemouregal and Sharathek discussing an alliance with Lucian, for he was growing considerably in power, making progress on his quest to find the Elder Artifacts. The Gargoyle eventually suggested that Lucian could be close to finding it, but Zemouregal dismissed it as a thing of fairy tales and simply rejected the idea. He then summoned Arav and they went to inspect the troops. Later the adventurer as well as Hartwin encountered Arav by himself, who was able to explain his curse when Zemouregal's concentration was actually elsewhere before being called again. They finally overheard Zemouregal saying that he was about to commence the attack itself, which led the duo to immediately return to the palace and inform Rovin to have the beacon network activated and the troops prepared. As the undead forces marched to Varrock, the adventurer went to consult the last known Incamdo dwarf, Thurgo, about how to defeat the zombies themselves, and was eventually directed to the Sacred Forge in the lost city of Camdozel. They uncovered the city and, with the help of another Incamdo by the name of Romano, managed to actually activate the forge. The forge told them that the descendant of the Elder of Avarocca to whom the shield belonged was the only one able to stop the invasion. When Zemouregal appeared in a nightmare, gloating on how his forces had reached Varrock, claiming the adventurer was too late, the adventurer himself hurriedly returned to Varrock, just as Zemouregal's forces overwhelmed the Varrockian Paris. They were forced to find the descendant of one of the original elders of Varrock, who was the only person who could actually use this shield to destroy the zombie army. After some quick investigating, they actually discovered that Dementhius Fitzharmon to be the individual they was actually looking for, and actually handed the Shield of Arav to him. Dementhius unlocked the shield's true power and indeed destroyed the entire zombie army in a very similar way to their original defeat. Zemouregal, defeated once again, simply withdrew and departed for the north, back to the ritual of rejuvenation. So this brings us a bit closer to recent days. The next time you see Zemouregal after this is during the ritual of rejuvenation, and it was shortly before the 18th ritual of rejuvenation that the adventurer, with the assistance of the Zarosian Majharrat by the name of Mahjarrat, then disguised as the human Ali the Wise, once again infiltrated Zemouregal's base. This time though, they advanced to the room where Arav's heart was kept and actually managed to steal it, after stealthily bypassing the security systems. They kept it in a specially prepared jar, and only hours before the ritual of rejuvenation would take place, they broke into Zemouregal's fort while he was preparing his speech. They smashed an obsidian prism that Zemouregal had created to strengthen his control over Arav before quickly leaving, thus allowing the curse of Arav to finally be broken. Mahjarrat, the adventurer, and Certification, Idria as well as Acrosay were the first to reach the ritual stone. It was here they actually encountered Lucian before a fight ensued between them. After the arrival of freneskae and another battle with Lucian, the other Majharrat slowly began to arrive, including Zemouregal himself, who appeared next to his cousin after Akthanakos. Zemouregal subtly but aggressively lobbied his cousin, who had declared himself leader of the ritual, for a Zarosian Majharrat to be the sacrifice. Though he did not care which Zarosian would be sacrificed, he immediately settled on sacrificing Gielinor, when Lucian decided it was because Gielinor was considered the weakest Majharrat of them all. When a fight soon broke out between the Majharrat after Mahjarrat attacked Lucian, demanding that he be the one sacrificed due to the simple threat he posed, Zemouregal sided with his cousin by summoning Sharaturk, and as well as a troop of zombies to attack while he duelled Azanadra. After the zombies were defeated by freneskae and his Barrows brothers, Zemouregal summoned Arav into the fight to deal with freneskae's wights. The adventurer then lured Arav to his heart, which was in a jar between icy rocks near the ritual marker. This released him from his curse. Arav immediately turned against Zemouregal as you'd expect and launched a flurry of berserk attacks at him in fury, almost killing him. Zemouregal was not able to deal with both Azanadra as well as Arav at the same time, and as such begged his cousin to help him. Lucian ignored him. Focusing on his own adversary, Wahisiatl. Upon seeing this, an enraged Zemouregal then turned against him, and convinced all of the Majharrat present at the ritual of rejuvenation to do so as well. Soon enough, they all joined together to attack Lucian. When the time for the ritual finally arrived, the fighting was stopped by a bored Lucian who sacrificed Gielinor to rejuvenate the Majharrat, Zemouregal included. Immediately after everyone was restored to full power, the Majharrat prepared to attack Lucian once more, but they were stopped when Lucian brought in the Stone of Jazz to use its power. It was then, at that particular moment, when Lucian touched the stone, the true Dragonkin was summoned to destroy him. Lucian attempted to slay them with an initially successful skirmish, when Sakurth, a third Dragonkin, eventually turned up, picked up the Staff of Armadyl, and beat Lucian from behind. Breaking the orb of the staff with the impact, Lucian was knocked off his feet, and Sakurth impaled the staff shaft into his chest, killing him in the process. After witnessing his cousin's death, Zemouregal teleported in fear that the Dragonkin would soon kill him too. Content that Lucian had died, he returned to his fort once more, where he began planning his next move. Following the events at the Ritual of Rejuvenation, Zemouregal bided most of his time in his fortress, planning. This soon changed, however, when the archaeologist Orlando Smith discovered what he believed to be the resting place of Guthix. With the help of a very familiar adventurer, Smith was actually able to enter the newly uncovered temple in search of something, a relic from the First Age, to take back to his peers at the museum in Varrock. However, it was in the process the adventurer activated a butterfly-shaped artifact, causing the pathway to the inner caverns to be revealed, simultaneously triggering a security system around the world, warning that Guthix had finally been located. When the stone circle in Varrock began glowing, a selection of the Dark Wizards there travelled to Zemouregal's domain to meet with the Majharrat himself. The wizards soon informed Zemouregal of what was transpiring, prompting Zemouregal to immediately realise the importance of such an occurrence. If Guthix were to be killed, the edicts he had created barring the gods from Gielinor would soon be destroyed, allowing them to once again return, Zamorak, his master, included. Zemouregal then began to plot Guthix's downfall, as you would expect, determined to bring the God of Chaos back to the world and secure himself a high and respectful position. However, unbeknownst to him, at the time, he was actually being observed in secret by freneskae and the adventurer, concealed within the Shadow Realm. Zemouregal, much like many other god's followers, soon made his way to the excavation site, and he was actually able to breach one of the abandoned storage rooms with an army of undead at his command. To his surprise, however, he was actually met by the adventurer and the Guthixian allies, who had actually somehow managed to prepare a defense against him. After a moment of exchanges in which Zemouregal revealed his plan to return Zamorak, the two forces clashed. Whilst the Guthixians dealt with Zemouregal's minions, it was the adventurer himself that actually faced the Majharrat directly. Zemouregal quickly proved himself a tough adversary, summoning portals to make himself invulnerable to damage, as well as additional minions for the Guthixians to be kept at bay. However, despite Zemouregal's best efforts, he ultimately failed in his endeavour, the adventurer demonstrating their own formidable skill, actually defeating the Mahjarrat Lord. forced him to accept and acknowledge his defeat. Zemouregal, at which point, decided to retreat. The adventurer, however, went on to defend against the other invaders, including Zemouregal's fellow Zamorakian Majharrat in Nakra, and actually managed to prevail against them all. In the end, this victory for the Guthixians would not last long when Guthix's inner chamber was finally breached by freneskae, who, with a reconstructed Staff of Armadyl, had proceeded to slay the ancient god. Now, with Guthix dead, his edicts were nullified, and a new age was begun. An age where the gods could once again step foot on Gielinor after years of banishment, with Saradomin being the first to return. With the barrier dismantled and Zamorak's return inevitable, Zemouregal now waits for his lord to appear so that he could stand by his side once more. It was soon after this, though, that freneskae decided to announce his grand ascendancy. And you can see Zemouregal alongside Anakra, General Khazad, Azanadra, Akthanakos, as well as Mahjarrat simply waiting outside the Empyrean Citadel in order to try and stop freneskae from ascending to godhood. After seeing Ixtharion pass through into the Citadel, Zemouregal complains that they've waited long enough and tries to go in himself. However, he was soon forced back by the Barrows brothers guarding the door, before freneskae replies with access denied. Little bit of other information, his allies and stuff. Until the 18th ritual of Rejuvenation, Arav was Zemouregal's most powerful undead soldier. Although he was forced to actually become his soldier against his will, Zemouregal's main following, pretty much his necromancy following, is undead troops. His massive undead army. It was also the Gargoyle Sharath-Turk. It's a weird name, I know, Sharath-Turk. The Gargoyle Sharath-Turk himself actually seems to be in charge of the undead armies themselves. He's also an emissary between his Majharrat brethren and can be useful in combat despite Zemouregal always blaming him for his losses. Sharath-Turk has always remained loyal to him and has proven to be quite useful, even though his masters claimed otherwise. Under Zemouregal's command, there is a vast army of zombies, which are armoured, as well as simple undead such as ghosts and basically specialised skeletons, that kind of thing. Zemouregal's fort and Zemouregal's base can actually be found up near the Ice Plateau, just south of Mahjarrat Fortress. Zemouregal actually also seemed to have a short-lived alliance with his cousin Lucian. After noticing that he had become extremely powerful and that it would be wise to keep on his good side. They also ran the investigation towards the ritual marker after the events of the 17th ritual together as well. Lucian's refusal to aid his cousin, though, pretty much brought this to an abrupt end. And for the most part, I think that's pretty much everything covering Zemouregal himself. He's a pretty damn good little Majharrat, if you can put it that way. Now, he's fairly strong, and although he is pretty arrogant, I'll give him his dues. If you go through all of the individual laws, like the books of the Aberraka fight and that kind of thing, you get the impression that he can be pretty arrogant and kind of... yeah, just full-on arrogant, I think. That's the best way to describe him. However, Zemouregal is pretty powerful. He does actually have a gigantic horde of undead. So, for the most part, especially seen through the game, the best way to deal with Zemouregal himself is to have an army of your own, or at least something powerful enough to hold his undead army at bay. So yeah, Zemouregal is a pretty good little Majharrat. He's pretty high up in the rankings of the Zamorakian Majharrat power-wise. I have no idea on his position in Zamorak's army, but yeah, that is pretty much everything to do with Zemouregal. So that is another Majharrat taken down. The other ones left are starting to get into the big names. Lucian, Mahjarrat, Azanadra, as well as freneskae, I think, are the ones left. So there we go. We might be hitting them soon. So hopefully you all enjoyed this, and until next time, people, I will catch you all later. Have a good one.